Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. Dr. Jess Tracy, welcome to the podcast. So happy to have you on today.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Yes, you're in Canada. I'm in Kansas. We were just discussing it's cold in both places right now. So if you're listening to this in the summer, we are in the winter right now when we are recording this. I want to read a little bit of your bio, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
You are a doctor of psychology, and you're also a professor of psychology at the University of British Columbia, a Sauder Distinguished, am I saying that right? Sauder Distinguished Scholar?
Yeah.
Is that the correct?
That is, it's the Sauder School of Business at UBC. So
okay, perfect.
Some people say Sauder, but I don't actually know. It's all good.
Okay, all right. You do a lot of work in the, what I want to call this, the social personality psychology. That's what your PhD is in. And we're going to dive into that today. So we're going to find more about what that's about. And you do have a book with 2 covers, which we talked about. If you're looking for it on Amazon, you're probably looking for Pride, the Secret of Success by Jessica Tracy, Tracy. And then if you did like I did and did a little research, you may see a white cover, but don't despair. The words on the inside are the same, which is Take Pride, Why the Deadliest Sin Holds the Secret to Human Success. And of course, I love that title because it's provocative. So it's like, why, first of all, we're just going to talk about the deadliest sin, because I like that.
No, I love that title too.
I love that phraseology. Right. Okay. So your book's about Take Pride. Your research is about pride, and I know that also ties into shame. You've done research on shame. So pride, shame, ego. There's good pride. There's kind of what I would call bad pride. I mean, if we're putting them in buckets that we can judge them. So why is, in the title of your book, why is pride the deadliest sin?
Well, I didn't say that originally. I think Dante said that, so I can't.
Okay, well,
but
but he wasn't. But your name's right under it.
Yeah,
so
right.
here's the quote in your name. So I'm going to blame you. So why is pride the deadliest sin?
Fair enough. Well, okay. So it's a funny thing when I started studying pride, because I think I'm Canadian now, but I'm originally American, and in both Canada and America, but I would say especially America, we love pride, right? We celebrate it. We're supposed to feel proud of our kids. We are going for pride all the time. We're proud of our country. All kinds of pride is really important. And then you do a teeny bit of historical research, and it's like, oh no, actually, this isn't how people have seen pride kind of ever in history in any other culture. The deadly sin thing is actually a pretty common view, much more common historically. And that's sort of the idea that pride is bad. In the Bible, they talk about pride goeth before the fall.
Before the fall, yeah.
Yeah, that it's this really dangerous thing that should be avoided. And lots of philosophers have kind of talked about it that way. If you go back to like ancient philosophy, tons of people were talking about how pride is bad. The only person who talked about pride as maybe okay was Aristotle. So he was sort of an early thinker saying, well, actually, if you are virtuous and you know it, don't be falsely humble. That's, sort of, he's not into the humble brag, right? So he's like, go for it, be proud. But most researchers, or not researchers, most early scholars sort of said, look, pride is bad. So it turns out when we dig a little bit into this in terms of how people think about pride today, both views are pretty much out there, right? We do have these 2 different conceptualizations and 2 different experiences of pride, where on the one hand, there's pride in our achievements, pride that's sort of confidence. I feel good about myself. I work hard. I have an achievement. I accomplish something and I feel proud, and that's great. And it's associated with all kinds of great things, pro-social behaviors, good personality traits. But then there's also this other kind of pride. We call it hubristic pride. And that is what is colloquially referred to as arrogance, egotism, conceitedness, right? And that's certainly part of what pride is. It's a very different experience. It feels really different. People, judge us really differently when we have that kind of pride. It's linked to different kinds of more problematic behaviors, aggression, hostility, bragging, basically behaviors that typically lead people to not like us. We don't like people who are too arrogant. Interestingly, both kinds of pride are linked to social status. So there's a reason that we have prides. Both prides ultimately get us power over others, which is, has evolutionary advantages. People who are more powerful get more resources, best mates, more, influence over the group. So both prides are adaptive, but they work in really different ways.
And so you're really taking the word pride, and you're just uncoupling and saying there's two versions of pride, right? There's basically the pride that's almost, I would say, an earned pride as part of you're part of a social collective, and the pride comes from almost like a lion, a lion's pride or something. But you're ultimately are earning pride through your acts or through your generosity or through some way of contributing. And then there's the pride that is, and you can dive deeper into these definitions, but then there's the pride of actually, it sounds like almost taking. So one sounds to me like I'm giving something, and in return for that, I'm giving something, or I'm doing something that I earn it, versus I'm trying to take something to try to dominate or to try to control. So I'll let you play with those.
I think to some extent that's the case. I think, you can feel the hubristic pride from an achievement. But typically the way it works is, okay, you have some sort of success, whatever it is in your work domain. If you're a student, maybe you do well on an exam or some promotion at work. And instead of sort of focusing on, wow, I worked really hard for this. This feels really good. This is getting me to a place I want to be. I'm just going to kind of enjoy this and figure out what I need to do next to keep the feeling going in terms of how do I keep achieving? You sort of think, okay, how do I feel as good about myself as possible? Well, for sure, the way to do that is to tell everyone I know, right?
Gotcha.
So then the pride becomes less about how you feel about yourself and more about reflecting sort of in the bask of others' glow, so social appraisal, others' praise, that kind of thing. And once you are sort of oriented that way, then the pride is becoming much more what looks like arrogance, right? People who sort of who need that, they're the people who are going to post their achievement on Facebook and sort of relish all the likes and congratulations. And at some level, of course, others want to know about your achievement. We care about the people we love. We're happy for them. At some level, it also gets really annoying, right? We often don't like it when people post about their achievements, because arrogance is really a disliked kind of trait, I think pretty much universally, although it varies sort of culture, how much it's disliked. Yeah.
And so you say this happens in social media. I was not aware of this. Is this,
I know, right?
Is this anything? I just did not know that so people on social media are posting stuff to get attention. This is odd. Who'd have thought? I'm just I'm just shocked. And so, well, as we talk about social media and kind of that area, in both titles, in both books, you say we can use pride to have success. So I'm not seeing that link yet in our conversation. So how are we linking pride? And when I think you used the word success, correct? So how are you defining that pride and success?
So what the research suggests is that actually, in terms of success, authentic pride is the better, the good kind of pride, which we call authentic pride. That's the way to go for success. And the idea is that it's a motivating factor, right? The reason that we want to achieve, that we want to do well in our various pursuits, whether it's work or athletics or hobbies, or even, something like relationships, being a good partner, being a good parent. The reason that we want all that is because we want to feel good about ourselves. And that good feeling about ourselves, that is what authentic pride is. So it's this massive motivator, right? We do well, we get this jolt of emotion, and it's not just happiness. It's very different the way that we feel when we feel good about ourselves compared to, say, you run into an old friend. That's a great feeling. It's happiness. It's not pride. Very different to have a success, because you feel good about yourself. And evolution kind of designed us to have those feelings, because we then seek them, right? We then will engage in behaviors to get those feelings. And we particularly do that when we're lacking them. So we have studies showing that when students do poorly on an exam, those of them who say they feel a missing sense of pride, low levels of authentic pride in response to that, those are the students who then change their behaviors for the next exam. They study harder typically. And then they actually do better as a result on that next exam. And we can statistically trace back their improved performance to that missing pride, right? So when you sort of are feeling like, oh, I am not doing what I want to be doing to feel good about myself. There's something missing in my life. There's something missing in my performance. That motivates behavioral change, which in turn does lead to success. So it's really adaptive.
Okay. And so you're saying that, so the success and the link to pride is basically, if I'm not achieving what I want to achieve, and then I use that lack of pride, that then it's almost like an internal motivator to say, you know what, I want to feel good about. So you're linking up that feeling good about myself, and I'd almost say self-worth. I'm almost thinking this authentic pride sounds like self-worth. It's like I feel right. So I feel more self-worth, and then there's this sense of pride that comes with that.
That's right.
As almost a byproduct of self-worth
Well, I would
almost,
say it's
or is
almost
it?
the same thing. We have scales that we use to measure authentic and humanistic pride, and they're each 7 items or 7 sort of things that people will say, yeah, I feel that to a pretty high level. And one of them is I have self-worth. So you're exactly right. That is part of what it means to feel pride. And, you can say, okay, well, what about people who are achieving? When you achieve, the people in that study I mentioned who did well on the exam, they felt a lot of pride. And they didn't change their behavior because they'd already behaving in a way that led to success. They just kept up the same behavior. So, it's not the case that pride doesn't motivate continued positive performance. It does. It's just that really where we need it is when we're not feeling it, the absence of it. That's what really pushes us to kind of go ahead and succeed in a big way, to change our behavior essentially.
I studied a lot of Tony Robbins stuff, and he studied that from, he studied all his stuff is from other people. And he always talked about, like, one of the 6 human needs as he defined them is this feeling of significance. And that I'm kind of hearing that in this conversation is basically everybody needs significance, like almost recognized. And I can do that through acts of goodness, or I can do that through acts of badness. Basically, I'm going to throw that in, right?
Yeah, totally.
I can be a significant contributor to my community, to the world, to my family, and I can get my sense of pride or self-worth from that. Or I can go, rob a liquor store and have significance because my name is in the news, and right. So I'm still getting significance, and maybe that's not quite prideful on the other side, but I need to be recognized. Am I being recognized for doing something really bad, or am I being recognized for doing something good? But as human beings, I think it goes back to doesn't it go back to almost our existence itself, which is if my tribe around me doesn't recognize me, they may not protect me and I may die.
That's exactly right. And I would say the person who, robs a liquor store or whatever, doing something bad, I think that's about pride also. It's a different social group that they're essentially using to balance their self-worth off of.
Gotcha.
So it's no longer going to be sort of the acceptable societal self-worth that says don't rob, achieve in these other ways. But there is some social group, the gang members, whatever it is, that's going to really reward them for that. And that's what they're getting for. That happens to people who can't achieve success in the mainstream way. They go to these other methods. And that's where they're going to feel pride, right? Gang members, they're unable to achieve success in sort of the traditional educational mainstream routes, but they find a gang and they say, okay, actually, I can achieve success and self-worth and feel really good about myself and a lot of pride by being really successful at dealing drugs or, whatever it is, robbing a liquor store. So I do think it's all about pride. Pride, the things that aren't about pride is basically when we're sitting on the couch watching TV, which I have no problem with. But for the most part, we're doing that not because we want to feel pride, but because we want to relax. Maybe we want to feel happy. It's more about sort of basic survival needs, taking self-care, essentially, the sort of basic level needs. Pride is sort of an achievement, or this next level that humans distinctively have, which is that beyond wanting to survive, we want to do more. We want to get status. We want, like you say, to be included by our social groups, to not be neglected by others, to build relationships that are really important. And all those things are basically what have made us the amazing species that we are, right? That's sort of what's led to the incredible progress and culture and technology that we've developed, is really because we want to go beyond just survival.
Right. Yeah, totally. And just to add some color to the conversation, you make me sound really smart. So thank you for agreeing. I was like, you know what? I like Jess because when I talk, she validates me.
Okay.
I feel a certain, and I feel a certain pride in that, right? And it there may be a little hubristic stuff in there, but for the most part, it's authentic. It's like, wow, I like you. You make me feel smart. I graduated a business thing, Stegan Leadership Academy, actually. It was a year-long, kind of like an MBA, but not an MBA, where it's really about leadership skills and self-authorship and really looking at yourself and saying, how am I communicating? Is it effective communication? All this stuff. They take us through this year-long thing. And so they have a reunion every year. And the founder called me and said, hey, would you come do this grounding exercise to kind of kick off the day? And I was like, Rand, I said, I really don't want to be on stage. I really don't want to be in front of people. I've been doing a good job of just staying in my little bubble and I went from kind of an extroverted personality to a very introverted, very private person through COVID and through the post-COVID stuff. I've had a lot of struggles, I would say, mentally and financially and just in all ways. And so, but I said, but if I can serve, I'll come and do this thing. And he said, well, I want you to do this because he said, we're going to have professional meditators in the audience. We're going to have people there that could do a meditation. He said, but you're just raw. he said, I just want that raw, kind of authentic, just be you.
Yeah.
And so I went and I did the deal, and I was terrified. I was so nervous. I very rarely do I get nervous public speaking, but it had been a long time. I hadn't been on stage. There was 400 roughly people in the audience, and these were definitely peers, if not more than peers.
Sure.
Financially and business. And I was terrified. And, I just got up there and I just let go. And for me, I just said, God, you do what you need to do through Matt so that whoever's in the audience can get whatever they need from you, because and I told the audience, I said, I really don't want to be here. And I gave them choices too. I said, here's the deal. We can do this nice breathing thing and we can all feel good, or we can go over here. And I kind of joked about taking the red pill, or we can take the red pill and we can go down the rabbit's hole, and we'll see what comes. And of course, they're very, in the space of being progressive. And so they're yelling red pill before I get it out of everybody wants a red pill. And I said, no, we can do the blue. I literally, there's like, no, red. So we did the red, and it was a short thing, 6 minutes, but guided visualization through a labyrinth is kind of what we did, because that was the theme. The labyrinth was the theme. And so I come off the stage, and this is like at 8:45 in the morning. So I'd probably get done by a little before 9. And the rest of the day, it was one of the more interesting things where people came up to me and just had profound experiences in this 6 or 8 minutes.
Wow.
I mean, we're like people, like a lady from New Zealand came up who's a meditation coach. She didn't tell me that at the time until after, but she came up, she said, I thought, who's this guy coming to stage? Who's he think he is? Right. And she said, but that was really profound. And I was like, well, thank you. But there was a sense of pride, but it was more, my pride was, I'm glad they received something that they needed, not, wow, Matt did a great. So in the past, when there was a sense of, I did a good job, right? I did a good job. I did a good thing. And this time it was much more like, thank you, Lord, for giving them something that wasn't mine to give.
Right.
And so it was anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, first of all, I'm very curious about what your labyrinth thing is, because it sounds amazing, but
well, apparently it was,
yeah,
but it wasn't mine. So it wasn't mine to give. So
right.
Yes.
Right. Well, and I think that's a classic example of authentic pride, right? That, on the one hand, it can be something that you did and you're really responsible for, but I think often it's something that we learn from others. And more importantly than where we got it, I think, is what gives us the pride. And it sounds like for you, it's not the fact that everyone's looking up to you and thinking you're awesome. It's the fact that you really help people, that you actually gave something to someone else that made them feel something, and something they needed. And that can be an amazing source of pride, seeing, the connection with someone else and feeling that you serve that. I absolutely think that can be, I think this is something, as a parent, I don't know if you're a parent, but I have.
Yes, I am. I have 2 kids. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a 13-year-old, and I feel like, only a parent understands the unique joy / pride that you feel in actually coming up with something that will make your kid happy. This gets hard. I don't know how old your kids are, but it gets harder and harder as
the bar goes up.
Oh, ice cream, no problem.
Yeah, exactly. I just bought my son ice cream on the way home from school a little bit ago. So yes,
exactly. That's easy. As they get older, and so coming up with something that actually gets that like excitement in their eyes, especially as they approach teenagehood, that's a huge source of pride, right? And it's not like, oh, I'm a great parent, but there is this sense of like, I did something that makes this person who I care about more than anyone else in the world happy in a, unique way. And I think that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So yeah, totally.
Well, and now that you brought up kids, so I have a 7-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I love to watch. I love the ages. They're so cute. Okay. But I just love seeing truly the sense of pride that they have when they do something, and then we give them affirmation in something they've done. So my 3-year-old now, she'll get out my vitamins in the morning. She'll come in and she'll take the bottle caps off and she'll set them out for me. Her name's Sophie. And so she's 3. She's barely high enough to reach the counter. She'll set them out and I'll be, Sophie, you are such a good helper. And when I look at her face, there's just this little smile, and she's like, I am a good helper, right? And it's so, it's so authentic. And so she loves doing these little, like, she loves pushing the garage door opener before we leave in the morning. And that's like, you could tell she takes that on as that's her thing.
Yeah, right? Absolutely.
I am doing something to contribute to the family. I feel good about it. And it's so refreshing to see that, to your point, authentic pride. She's not doing it You're right. She's not doing it to manipulate the situation or because I'm going to give her a cookie. There's no reward in it other than she's contributing to me or the family. And so she feels that sense of connection, that sense of pride.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think what you're talking about is that's how we socialize kids to have sort of a healthy sense of self and sense of self-worth, right? Is that kids, from an early age, they're at some point, probably she has been rewarded for doing things like that. Whether the reward is just a smile, Sophie, right. You're doing great. You're being a great.
Yes, of course. Oh, I tell her, yeah.
And they love that, right? That's all they want at that age, just to know that they're pleasing the two people who care most about them in the world, right? And so that's super rewarding. And that's how she's learning, oh, this is the kind of thing that I need to do to be the kind of person I want to be. And that's right. That's the development of self. And then over time, as she gets older, those things will make her feel proud about herself more and more, and then it gets more complicated and they go through the period where they don't want to help at all because then they feel proud and sort of rebelling and doing their own thing. But deep down, they have that internal sense of, I want to, to be a good kid, to be a good family member means helping in certain ways. It's great.
And thank you for that. Thank you for that reflection, that feedback. And I'm seeing a sticking point as I think about my own experience of life, which is the only eyes that I have to see through. I see this almost pull back from authentic pride because of some of the preconditioned thought of you should be humble, right? So there's almost this, as I look at pride, it seems because of maybe historical, biblical, or just historical, cultural, we shouldn't be prideful.
Yeah.
Right. So there's almost this friction or this thing where when I'm going to use the word should, which I don't like the word should, but when we should be feeling authentic pride for something we actually did to contribute to another, there's this little thing that kicks up that says, but who are you to feel good about that, right? Or should you feel good? So what's happening there? And is there a way to kind of decouple that?
Yeah, totally. So I think, that's part of why I really like the title of the hardcover book, Take Pride, because I think that's sort of a point I wanted to make, is that every religion, including, Buddhism, for example, I think the Dalai Lama has called pride really problematic. He refers to it as something that humans shouldn't experience. It's not good for us. And I take real issue with that. I think the pride that all these scholars and religious leaders are talking about is hubristic pride. And I absolutely agree. And the data show there are a lot of problems with hubristic pride. I don't encourage anyone to feel hubristic pride. But authentic pride, we need to have, right? We need it for ourselves. We need it for our relationships. We need it for our society, right? Like I said, it is what causes progress. If we didn't want to ever feel good about ourselves, then I really don't know what would incentivize people to work hard. And of course, hard work is necessary for achievement. You could say, oh, what about money? Well, number one, do you really want people to only work hard for external incentives like money? I think the data show people actually work harder, put more of themselves into it when they are internally motivated, when it's not just about money, but about some sort of prestige or something that they're getting for themselves. That something is pride, right? So to say, no, you shouldn't feel proud, I really think that comes from a misunderstanding of the fact that pride is not just hubristic pride, that there's another side of it that's really good, that's adaptive, that's healthy, that has all kinds of positive social benefits, social consequences. And so I think that's where that comes from. And it's a cultural thing, so I think in an attempt to get people to not be arrogant, to not hold their, lord their power over others, which historically has been a problem and it is a problem in every culture. These scholars say, hey, don't feel proud. And I get where they're coming from. But again, that's hubristic pride. The better solution is to separate the two prides and say, yeah, don't feel this kind, but this kind's okay. It's actually really good. We should nurture it. We should go for it.
And if people are displaying hubristic pride, which I have done,
Everyone,
you're right. So yes, I'm not saying people and saying those people over there. I'm saying we, the people, when we're displaying or really leaning into hubristic pride, is there really an antidote other than the world's going to kind of kick our ass at some point? Is there even a fix for that?
Yeah, I think there is. I think recognizing it and making a conscious choice. I don't think it's out of our control, right?
Okay.
I think it's absolutely something we control. It's tempting, right? So, again, I think the best example is to think of a big achievement. And I think every one of us, I shouldn't say every one of us, most of us, we have that achievement. One of the first things we think is, who can I tell? Right?
Oh, gotcha. Yep.
And part of that is just sort of, I want to share this moment I'm having. And so, you tell your partner, the people you're really close to, you don't have to worry about bragging with, they know you, they love you. But then when it goes beyond that, the feelings dying down a little bit, the way that I can keep it up is by publicizing this in all my social media networks and more and more praise and likes and so on. that's where it's becoming hubristic. And that's where it's starting to lead to problems, because it's no longer about me feeling good about myself, just for who I am and for, what I've done and for being the kind of person I want to be. It's about getting the attention from others, right? And that's sort of needy insecurity. It's not driven by anything healthy. It's driven by this real need and dependence on others, I think, because we're not really sure that we're worthy. It's sort of driven by this deep, dark insecurity, I think. And so the idea, if you see that and you realize, okay, I don't want to feel that kind of pride. I see that kind of pride leads to all kinds of problems, interpersonal relationship problems, and so on. I'm going to just not do that. It's hard because it's always tempting. But in that moment where you think, oh, okay, how can I get more attention for this? That's where you say, wait a minute, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to stick with what I'm doing and focus on, instead of how can I get more attention, how can I get this feeling again by achieving in this way again, right? I feel this way because this achievement got me closer to the kind of person that I want to be. What's the next step toward being that kind of person, right? What else can I do to be the kind of self that I will feel proud in? So think about actions you can do to continue achieving, continue being the kind of person you want to be, rather than attention from others to just sort of reinforce the feelings that you have from that one success.
Yes. And what's the research show around pride and your relationship to a higher power?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. I mean, this is amazing to me as I think about it. I'm not sure that there is any research on that.
Interesting.
Issue. Whether pride, you would say, maybe impedes relationship with God or something like that.
Yes, I think that was one thing I was witnessing just in our conversation is kind of this, that the pride goeth before the fall. So that hubris pride is like, one of the deadly sins, could be considered like a sin type thing that's taking me away from this sense of connection with the higher power, because now I'm looking for the external validation, which we know is, and I know full well, is just a slippery slope, right? That's, if you're looking for the external validation, the world's going to twist and turn, and some days you're the hero and some days you're the villain, and some days you're on the in crowd and some days you're the outcast, right? That's just life. And so I have noticed that as my relationship has gotten, as I've had more of a relationship with, I'll say God or higher power. I mean, I say God, but I think people listening can think higher power. I have noticed that my sense of wanting to tell others about accomplishments or achievements has gone way down. Right?
That's amazing.
But my sense of service to serving something bigger than myself has gone way up. So now it seems, and thank you for just allowing me to share my experience, but my experience currently is more of that good feeling of being prideful is only coming through how can I serve other people, right? That's where my sense of pride is coming from, is more of this deep sense of, if I've been given grace, then how do I allow others to experience grace through me being there? And when I say me, not really me being there, but just, and I have plenty of faults, and my wife would be happy. I mean, I'm not walking on any water. There's no, right. There's nobody showing up to say, hey, would you like to apply for sainthood? That's not what I'm saying. Anger. And I have all the other, but my internal drive, I guess, now is focused more on, where for a long time, I will say for a long time, I loved seeing my name in the paper. I loved being kind of big in our little town of 500,000 people. People knew who I was. I was in business. I did this, I did that. And for a while that felt good. And it felt like, oh, look at me, I'm so proud. Right.
Yeah.
And then at some point there was really this, probably 10 years ago or longer, probably 15 years ago, there was just this awareness of, if that's all that there is to life, then life is super shallow, and I don't really want to even play the game of life anymore. And it was more of this resignation of, okay, I've got all this stuff, my name's in there, but this is nothing. This is like emptiness, right?
Right. Well, so I mean, the question that comes to me from this is, what caused that change? I mean, was there something that happened that led to this realization, or usually there's something, right?
Yeah. For me, I think it was just a prolonged sense that identity that I had built became so overinflated from a prideful, egoic standpoint that there was something internally that knew that wasn't real. Right? It was more of this, it was more of this sense of separation of, and weirdly enough, it would come to me. I used to be good at drinking, and not an alcoholic, but definitely good at it. I was very, if that was a sport, I was on the A team. But once in a while, after drinking a couple drinks and be buzzed, there was this awareness that would come through me that would literally say to me, there's more to life than this. You have to come find it.
Yeah.
And,
So yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Well, what I was going to say is this reminds me a lot of a story I tell in the book, because I think this is exactly the kind of thing when I'm talking about that lack of pride, that awareness that, wait, something is missing. Yeah. And I think it's this realization, I'm not being the kind of person I want to be. I'm not living up to the kind of self that I hope for myself. And so that's what that lack of pride feels like. And so I tell the story of Dean Karnazes. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's calls himself the ultra marathon man. That's his first book. Very entertaining writer. He's an ultra marathon runner. So he runs these crazy races of like 100 miles at a time. And, it's very insane and intense, but he brings a lot of joy to a lot of people, and he's encouraged tons of people to run. And he's just a huge inspiration. He writes about his running exploits. But so he tells the story of how he got into this, and basically he'd run track in high school and then, gave it up, and as most people do, and got a job in business and was, having a kind of sales career. And he was 29 years old and just not really loving life, bored, succeeding, getting promotions, but it wasn't meaningful. It wasn't exciting. It wasn't who he really felt that he was. He had a wife. He was, totally in love, happy with that, but something was missing. And so he goes to his 30th birthday party at a bar, and his wife goes home early. And as he says, an attractive stranger starts flirting with him. And, he's had a few beers or more.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
And so, he's very close.
So the male ego can be stroked once it's had a couple drinks. This seems so odd. This seems so odd to me. Okay,
exactly.
Do tell more.
So I hear. So he sort of has this moment where he realizes, oh my God, I'm within, minutes of cheating on the woman I love. What am I doing? Right. Leaves the bar, goes home, and for some reason goes to his garage and finds this old pair of sneakers that he uses for gardening because he hasn't run in years, puts them on and just starts running. And he lives in San Francisco. He ends up running 30 miles down the coast.
Wow.
He runs all night long. He has this great story of how in the middle, he's starving. So he stops at Taco Bell and begs someone in the drive to give him money.
Buy him, oh my Lord. Now he's a bum. Now he's a homeless person. Right.
Exactly. After that, he could barely walk for 2 weeks because he tried to run that kind of distance, having not moved. That's what happens. Right. But he has this experience while he's running that all of a sudden he feels alive in a way that he hasn't in, a decade. And he realizes he has been living the wrong life. His life is in the wrong direction. That's not what he wants to be doing. He wants to change everything. And so with that, he quits his job. He starts training to be an ultra marathon racer and just changes his life around to be this inspirational runner and writer and speaker for people. And that is sort of how he learns, okay, this is the thing that gives me the meaning, the pride that I wasn't getting from my previous life. And it sounds like that's a lot of what you were going through as well.
I think so. And so for me, it's switched and still is. It's changing from, I want people to know who I am and be recognized because I don't want to feel unworthy, or I don't want to feel this sense of, I don't want them to find out that I'm just a fake or a fraud, kind of the imposter syndrome. In fact, I actually took it too far to the extreme. I was talking to a gentleman yesterday, and, as I was starting some stuff with the podcast and stuff like that, and he was like, well, what's your background? I kind of tell him my background. At the end, he just looks at me and he says, dude, that's really impressive. I mean, he's in his, he's 27 or 28, right? But he was still like, dude, that's super impressive. I was like, what? And I was like, and it took me aback a little bit. And I was like, I guess I have lived a little bit of life here and there, right? I've done a few things. So it went from kind of that feeling of, trying to probably coat or patch this underlying wound of I'm not not worthy, or I'm not, my self-worth is low. So I'm going to and I think you've talked about this in your book, that I'm going to almost to the point of narcissism, even though it, and to now the other side of it is like, basically, how do I serve God, and how do I be more present with my family, and how, serving my family feels good, and hanging out with my kids and I'm not a great dad every day, but being a solid, good dad, it gives me that sense of love, or that sense of connection, or whatever. And I'm hoping that's happening broad scale in society. I hope that because of the last 2 or 3 years, we've got enough of us have gotten our asses, and I'm going to use that again, our asses kicked, that now there's this, for me, there was a total reset of what's important.
Oh yeah. 100%.
And it just came down to, I don't care if anybody knows my name. I don't care if anybody, says you're a good guy or not a good guy. I'm still carrying some guilt and shame, and I know that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I do care a hell of a lot if my kids love me and if they feel supported and they feel loved and they've experienced joy. Then all of that, then I feel prideful. I feel like, you know what? No matter what has happened, no matter what I'm going through, I'm a good dad, right?
Totally.
Or I'm being I need to be a better spouse, but I'm working on that, right? So at least
Totally.
there's right.
Yeah.
That's a tougher. When they're 7 and 3, to your point, you buy them ice cream and you're their hero.
Yeah, exactly.
So
It's much easier. Absolutely. It's harder when they get to be a teenager, but still, I think it's easier. So yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think, COVID, it's such an interesting thing because, it hurt so many people and obviously killed so many people. And it's just been such a hard time. And at the same time, like you, I had been going through a hard time and COVID hit. There was a period here, like everywhere, where schools were closed.
Yep.
And so I find myself, I'm working from home, which for me, I'm lucky enough that that's really easy, unlike for some people.
Right.
And now I have an 11-year-old who's at home every day. And I'm like, how lucky am I that like when my kid's in grade 5, 11, I get to have lunch with her every day. And we would have lunch together and then we would do a little workout, and I was like, this is amazing. Like I'm getting, I was able to have the perspective to be like, this is something no parents get, or, previous to this time, no parents would get.
Yeah.
And I'm going to appreciate it and enjoy it. And we're going to bond through this. And we did. And we are so much closer as a result of that, and I think
totally.
I feel really lucky because I know people who had small children, as you probably did. It's much, much harder. She was at a perfect age,
right?
But still wanting to hang out with me, but also able to like now you go do your own thing. So,
right.
So I don't take that for granted, but at the same time, I do think there's been a big resetting, and you're absolutely right. The things that matter and are really important that are worth feeling pride about have really shifted for a lot of us, which is I think great. So,
yeah. I could ask you so many more questions, and I feel like that you're going to run long. So I'm going to start wrapping it up now because I told you that you would be the one to run long. I'm not going to run long on today's podcast. It will be you. Sure. So you did the research on pride. I know that there's shame that we didn't talk about that kind of is a cousin to pride, it sounds like. But kind of where are you today? What's kind of on your mind, or what are you researching and maybe why? If you don't mind sharing a little.
Yeah, no, not at all. I mean, so, the way that stuff works is everything takes a long time. So I'm still doing stuff on pride. A lot of the pride stuff led to work on social rank and social status and hierarchy. So I have a lot of work on that that's sort of still ongoing, and work with students on pride. And, I have one student who's really interested in dark stuff. And so he's looked at how hubristic pride makes people want to cheat to get status and engage in really problematic behaviors. Big picture, it's funny, this conversation is really interesting because I think big picture, I'm actually going more into looking at questions of meaning and what gives us meaning in life and how do we get that? And how can we get that within a scientific framework? I think, science is great, but problematic for meaning in a lot of ways because science says there is no real meaning. So in the universe, so I'm sort of trying to figure that out. And that's kind of my next big thing, which has been really exciting to think about. So, yeah. And
there's a whole nother show in that, but I'll touch on it a little bit,
Fair enough,
which is what I am seeing more and more. And I know that I'm seeing it because I am dealing with it or processing it myself. So I'm seeing it because it is me, but is this, am I living my purpose? Right? Am I living my purpose, and this sense of what is my purpose, and am I living that purpose? And I think that is another thing I think that happened through the COVID era, or still is, I guess, but through this time is that I see more and more people on social media and people I talk to just having this kind of awakening moment where they're like, am I living the life that I want to live? Am I living my purpose? And I was even seeing it a little bit before COVID in a weird population, which was seniors. I was seeing it in the senior population where after they retired, they had this lack of purpose because they're no longer contributing to society, or especially right post retirement. But now I'm seeing it in, like, obviously the millennials, that's what drives a lot of them, is this connection to, a mission or a purpose.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think for I'm in the Gen X, aren't I? Yeah. Gen Xers.
I also am Gen X.
Yeah. I had to think about that for a moment. But that means I am Gen X if I have to think about it. Right.
Exactly.
But in the Gen X population, I feel like that we're kind of in that kind of like I've said this to a couple of my friends, my brain grew up in my brain was developed in the, my kind of semi-adult brain in the 80s and the 90s when, it was a survival of the fittest and success was crushing your competition. And now I have to shift my brain over here to more of this. How can I collaborate? How can I move from competition to collaboration? Because now to be successful, at least from a purpose standpoint, I need to collaborate with others, right?
Yeah.
Because the end result's better for everybody, right?
That's a great point. It's funny. I hadn't thought about it in terms of this generational scheme, but you're totally right that, when we grew up, it was, the 80s and even the 90s, all about success and achievement and drive and competition. And that's not really the thing that gives people meaning anymore, and I think, the millennial generation really kind of shifted that for us, and credit to them. I'm appreciative of them for it because it's better,
Yes.
It is a real change. So it's interesting. Figuring out how to navigate that. I mean, especially, having a kid who's now Gen Z and she's super hyper aware of all these kinds of issues and sensitivity and people's differences and all that kind of thing. So it's really interesting to talk to her and be corrected by her.
That's amazing. And so, I think you could probably just write a book that just addresses Gen X, like the process of Gen Xers as they've gone through this weird bubble from going from kind of this very materialistic society to more of this holistic or purposeful society. And I think that's, and I guess maybe we could call that midlife crisis or something, but, I'm not buying a new car and I'm not driving, I'm not going out and spending money on, I'm actually being like, all right, well, what is this about? Right. What is right? What is the point? What is the purpose? And what do I do with that to gain pride?
Yeah. Totally.
Versus the shallowness of the 80s and 90s or the success that was before, which was all about how much stuff can I get and how big a house and, how status, right? It was about the status. And now it's like, but that's not, to your point, it just doesn't give us that warm fuzzy. It doesn't fill us up. The hole only gets bigger. It doesn't get smaller.
Totally. Yeah, no. And it's amazing to see how this is like crossing all different kinds of domains and areas and boundaries of people really wanting to figure out what their purpose is, what's the meaning of life, whether it's, exploring things like Eastern, yoga and meditation, or now there's like psychedelics are a big thing. And it's just really fascinating to see all that. So it's very cool.
I love it. Well, thank you for coming on today and sharing with us. People can obviously go to, I think, Amazon, right? Amazon and get your book. Sure. Yeah. Which it's the red cover. So look for the red cover, big white letters, Pride, the Secret of Success, and your name, Jessica Tracy. Jessica Tracy right underneath it. And I think you're active on some social media. Which social media are you active on?
Yeah, people can follow me on Twitter, Prof. Jess Tracy. Too hard to find, but yeah. And my website, you can find me at UBC if you search for the University of British Columbia. If you want to learn more about my research, you can find me at the psychology department there. So
Perfect. So if you need me to be a case study for your book,
okay, awesome.
like a monkey or something, I'll be happy to volunteer, or I'll be happy to write a foreword or something, just some type of testimony about your next book. And certainly when you get ready to release your next book, please let us know, and we'd be happy to have you come on and preview it for us and kind of share what your research is doing and what it's finding, because it's interesting on so many levels. And we didn't even get into leadership and corporate and, pride and how that affects the work. I mean, there's lots of layers to that thing, right? Because it is kind of a very core human condition or human attribute.
Yeah, no, I mean, and my book talks a lot about leadership and different kinds of leadership that come from different kinds of pride. So people who are interested in that can check that out. And it's all in there. So
yeah. So yes, I will love it. Well, so thank you so much for coming on today. It was such a pleasure to get to meet you.
Yeah, it was great meeting you too. Thanks for having me.
And if you'd like to have another conversation about anything you're doing, we'd love to have you come back on the show.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's been great.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jess.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE Vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.